Have you ever overheard something so cruel that it forever changed how you saw someone you loved? Asterisk, asterisk. I thought I knew my mother. I believed that despite her flaws, she accepted my family, especially my son, the child who made me a mother through adoption rather than birth. For years, I'd secretly supported my parents financially, paying their mortgage and utilities without them even knowing. I did it out of love, respect, and gratitude. Then one afternoon, I heard my mother's unfiltered truth while she thought I wasn't listening. "I can't be the grandma of a weirdo," she said about my son, my beautiful, sensitive boy who had already faced more rejection in his short life than most adults ever will. That night, I opened my banking app and canceled every automatic payment I'd been making for her. If my son wasn't good enough for her, my money wouldn't be either. My name is Meredith Carlisle, and at 34 I thought I had built a stable, loving, extended family for my son. I'm a structural engineer with a successful career in Portland, where I've carved out a comfortable life for myself and my son, Noah, who I adopted 5 years ago when he was 4. The journey to becoming Noah's mom wasn't easy, but from the moment I met him at the foster agency, with his serious eyes and quiet demeanor, I knew we belonged together. My parents, Barbara and Richard, live about 40 minutes away in the same suburban home where I grew up. After my father's construction business failed during the economic downturn, they nearly lost their house. Without telling them, I stepped in and took over their mortgage payments and most of their utilities. My mother believed they'd qualified for some special assistance program through the bank. I never corrected her, happy to quietly help the parents who had sacrificed so much for me growing up. They weren't perfect, especially my mother, whose critical nature and traditional views had always created tension between us. But I thought we'd reached a good place when Noah came into my life. Though initially hesitant about my choice to adopt as a single mother, they seemed to embrace Noah as their grandson. My mother doted on him during visits, my father taught him to fish, and I believed we had become the family I'd always wanted for my son. I was wrong. So devastatingly wrong. It was a Wednesday afternoon when everything changed. Noah had an early dismissal from school, and I'd taken a half day off work to surprise my parents with a visit. Noah had made my mother a ceramic bowl in his art class, and he was bursting with excitement to give it to her. "Do you think Grandma will like it?" he asked from the back seat, his small fingers tracing the uneven rim of the blue-glazed bowl. "She's going to love it," I assured him, glancing in the rearview mirror at his anxious expression. "You put so much love into making it. We'd done this drive countless times, but something about that day felt different. Maybe it was the unusual midweek visit, or perhaps it was some subconscious awareness of what was coming. Whatever it was, as we pulled into my parents' neighborhood, I felt an odd tightness in my chest. My parents' house has a circular driveway, but I parked on the street instead, planning to surprise them by coming through the back gate that led directly to their patio, where they often sat in the afternoons. "Let's sneak up on Grandma and Grandpa," I suggested to Noah with a conspiratorial wink. His face lit up. He loved anything that felt like an adventure. Hand in hand, we walked around the side of the house toward the wooden gate. I could hear voices as we approached my mother's and another woman's. Her weekly coffee with her friend Susan, I realized. I put my finger to my lips, signaling Noah to stay quiet, and reached for the gate latch. That's when I heard it. "Just not what I expected from my only grandchild," my mother was saying, her voice carrying clearly in the still afternoon air. "I try, Barbara, I really do. But there's something off about him. The way he lines up his toys, how he won't eat if his food's touch. Those meltdowns when things don't go exactly as planned. He's just a sensitive child," Susan replied. "Kids are all different. It's more than that," my mother insisted. Meredith could have had her own children, normal children. Instead, she chose this ... situation. "I can't be the grandma of a weirdo. I just can't. Richard says I need to accept it, but every time that boy does something strange, I feel embarrassed. What do I tell the ladies at church when they ask about my grandson?" My hand froze on the gate latch. Beside me, Noah was picking at a loose thread on his shirt sleeve, seemingly unaware of the conversation happening just feet away. But I knew better. Noah missed nothing, especially not words spoken about him. I looked down at him, praying he hadn't understood, but the slight stiffening of his small shoulders told me otherwise. His eyes remained downcast, fixed on the ceramic bowl clutched in his hands. "What does Grandma mean, Mom?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. In that moment, Something hardened inside me. A mother's protective instinct, perhaps. Or simply the realization that the woman I'd been supporting financially for years saw my precious child as an embarrassed manta. Weirdo. It means we're leaving, I said quietly, taking the bowl from his hands and guiding him back toward the car. Grandma isn't feeling well today. But her present, he began. We'll save it for another time. The drive home was silent. Noah stared out the window, his expression unreadable in the way it often became when he was processing difficult emotions. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, my mind replaying my mother's words in an excruciating loop. Mom? Noah finally said as we neared our house. Am I weird? The question shattered me. No, sweetheart, I said firmly. You're not weird. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. You're perfect. Then why doesn't Grandma want to be my grandma? How do you explain cruelty to a child who has already experienced too much of it? Noah had spent his first 4 years being shuffled between foster homes, never quite fitting in, never quite good enough to keep. He had attachment issues, sensory sensitivities, and anxiety that sometimes manifested in rigid behaviors, all completely normal responses to his early life experiences. None of which made him weird or less deserving of unconditional love. Sometimes adults say unkind things they don't really mean, I said, though I knew my mother had meant every word. But that's about them, not about you. Never about you. At home, Noah retreated to his room, carefully placing the ceramic bowl on his bookshelf before burying himself in a book. I stood in the kitchen, trembling with a rage I'd never experienced before. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, oblivious to what had transpired. Haven't seen you and Noah in a while. When are you coming to visit? I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up my banking app, staring at the automatic payments I'd set up years ago. $2,450. Monthly mortgage payment for Barbara and Richard Carlisle, $275. Monthly utility bill payments, $189. Property tax installment for 5 years. I'd been silently keeping my parents afloat. More than $150,000 I'd paid toward their house, not counting utilities and other expenses. Money that could have gone into Noah's college fund. Money that could have secured our future. Money that had instead supported a woman who called my son a weirdo behind my back while accepting my financial help. I thought about the day I decided to take over their payments. My father, proud to a fault, had broken down crying at the kitchen table, admitting they were 3 months behind on the mortgage. My mother had sat beside him, silent tears streaming down her face as she contemplated losing the home where they'd lived for 30 years. We'll figure something out, I'd promised them, though I had no solution in mind at that moment. Later that week, I'd gone to their bank and arranged to take over the payments without their knowledge. The loan officer had been confused but cooperative once I explained the situation. We'll tell them they've been approved for a special restructuring program, he suggested. The payments will be made and they'll never know the source. It had seemed like the perfect solution. I could help my parents while preserving my father's dignity. And for 5 years, it had worked flawlessly. They believed they'd caught a lucky break. I knew I was fulfilling my filial duty. But as I sat staring at my banking app that evening, with Noah quiet in his room and my mother's words echoing in my mind, I realized something fundamental had changed. The money I'd been giving them wasn't just financial support, it was trust. Trust that they would love my son as I did, that they would be the grandparents he deserved. That trust was now irrevocably broken. Without further hesitation, I clicked on each automatic payment and selected cancel. 3 confirmations later, it was done. The financial safety net I'd provided for years had been removed with a few simple clicks. As I closed my laptop, a strange calm settled over me. I felt neither guilt nor uncertainty, only clarity. If my mother couldn't accept my son, she wouldn't benefit from my money. It was as simple as that. I went to Noah's room and found him arranged on his bed, surrounded by his favorite stuffed animals placed in the precise order that made him feel safe. He looked up as I entered, his eyes still holding a shadow of hurt. "Can we have breakfast for dinner?" he asked, his standard request when he was feeling unsettled. "Absolutely," I smiled, sitting beside him on the bed. "French toast or waffles?" "Waffles. With the blueberries on the side, not mixed in." "You got it, chef." As we made dinner together, Noah gradually returned to his usual self, chattering about the book he was reading and the science experiment his class was conducting at school. I marveled at his resilience, his ability to bounce back from wounds that would cripple most adults. My phone rang as we sat down to eat, my mother calling now, probably wondering why I hadn't responded to her text. I sent it to voicemail. Noah noticed. "Aren't you going to talk to Grandma?" I set my phone down. "Not tonight, buddy. Tonight is just about us." Single quotes later. After Noah was asleep, I checked my voicemail. "Meredith, it's Mom. Just checking in. Your father and I were wondering if you and Noah might come over this weekend. It's been too long since we've seen our grandson. Call me back." The casual way she said our grandson, as if I hadn't heard her true feelings just hours earlier, made my blood boil. I deleted the message without responding. The next morning, I dropped Noah at school with an extra long hug and headed to my office. Trying to focus on the structural analysis waiting on my desk rather than the family implosion unfolding in my personal life. My assistant poked her head in around noon. "Your mother's called twice," she informed me. "Says it's important." "Thanks, Jen. I'll call her back later," but I didn't. Nor did I return her calls the next day, or respond to the increasingly concerned texts from both my parents over the weekend. It wasn't until Monday morning, exactly 5 days after canceling the automatic payments, that I finally heard the consequences of my decision. My father called while I was driving Noah to school. "Meredith," his voice was tight with confusion, "we just got a call from the bank. They're saying our mortgage payment is late, and that the automatic payment from their special program failed. Do you know anything about this?" The moment had arrived sooner than I expected. Part of me had hoped it would take longer for them to notice, giving me more time to prepare what I would say. "I need to drop Noah at school," I said, glancing at my son in the rearview mirror. He was absorbed in his book, seemingly unaware of the conversation. "I'll call you back in 20 minutes. This is serious, Meredith. They're saying there was never any special program. That someone else has been making our payments all this time." 20 minutes, Dad," I repeated, then ended the call. After leaving Noah with a kiss and watching him walk into his classroom, I sat in my car in the school parking lot, preparing myself for the conversation ahead. The anger that had fueled my decision 5 days ago had cooled into something more resolute of our boundary I knew I needed to maintain. Not just for myself but for Noah. I dialed my father's number. "Explain this," he demanded as soon as he answered. "The bank says there was never any assistance program. That someone else has been paying our mortgage for years." "That's correct," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I've been making your mortgage payments for the past 5 years, Dad, and the utility bills, and the property tax installments." Silence stretched between us, then, "What? Why wouldn't you tell us? You were about to lose the house. You were devastated." "I had the means to help, but I knew you wouldn't accept it directly from me, so I arranged it with the bank. They agreed to let you believe it was a special program." Another long silence. "I don't understand. Why are you telling me this now? Why did the payments stop?" I took a deep breath. "Because last Wednesday, Noah and I came to surprise you and Mom. We were at the back gate when I overheard her talking to Susan. I heard what she said about Noah. Dad, I heard her call my son a weirdo. I heard her say she couldn't be his grandmother Meredith. Meredith, your mother didn't mean, don't," I cut him off. "Don't defend her. Noah heard it too. Do you have any idea what that did to him? A child who's already faced rejection his entire life?" My father's sigh was heavy with resignation. "I told her to accept him as he is. I've been telling her that for years. Well, she hasn't, and I won't subsidize someone who rejects my son. If Noah isn't good enough for her, neither is my money. What are we supposed to do about the mortgage?" His voice had lost its edge, replaced by a weary acceptance. "That's not my problem anymore," I said, though the words hurt to speak. "You'll have to figure it out." Just like I had to figure out how to protect my son from his own grandmother's cruelty. I hung up, my hands shaking despite my firm words. Then I drove to work, wondering how long it would take for my mother to call, and what I would say when she did. My mother called 37 minutes after my conversation with my father. I watched her name flash on my phone screen, took a deep breath and answered. "What is your father talking about?" she demanded without greeting. "He says you've been paying our mortgage? And that you're stopping because of something you claim to have overheard." Her use of the word claim ignited something inside me, as if I'd invented the entire scenario. "I didn't claim to overhear anything, Mom," I replied, keeping my voice level. "I was at your back gate with Noah last Wednesday afternoon. We heard every word you said to Susan about not wanting to be the grandmother of a weirdo, about being embarrassed by my son. You were spying on me? Her voice rose indignantly. We were surprising you. Noah made you a ceramic bowl in art class. He was excited to give it to you. The silence that followed told me she was finally processing the implications. Did he? She began. Yes, Mom. He heard you. He heard his grandmother say she couldn't accept him. I didn't mean it like that, she said quickly. I was just venting to Susan. You know how she gets me talking. Don't blame Susan for your words, I said firmly. You meant every syllable and we both know it. This is why you've been ignoring our calls? And now you're punishing us financially over a private conversation? Her failure to express any concern for Noah's feelings further solidified my resolve. It's not punishment, Mom. It's a boundary. I've been silently supporting you and Dad for 5 years because I thought we were family. Because I believed you accepted and loved my son. Now I know the truth. Of course we love Noah, she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. He's just ... different. You have to admit that. The way he acts sometimes. Stop. I cut her off. Noah is exactly who he's supposed to be. Yes, he has quirks and sensitivities. Yes, he struggles sometimes. He's a child who spent his first 4 years being shuffled between foster homes, never knowing stability or unconditional love. What's your excuse for your behavior? That's not fair, Meredith. Neither is calling your grandson a weirdo behind his back while happily accepting financial support from his mother. So that's it? Her voice hardened. After everything we've done for you, you're gonna let us lose our home because of one comment you weren't even supposed to hear. The emotional manipulation was so familiar I could have scripted it in advance. For years, my mother had wielded everything we've done for you like a weapon whenever I failed to meet her expectations. What you do about your home is your decision, I replied calmly. You could downsize, get jobs, apply for actual assistance programs. I'm sure there are options for people in your situation. People in our... She sputtered. We're your parents, not some charity cases. And Noah is your grandson. Not some weirdo you have to explain to the ladies at church. I could practically hear her mind working, calculating whether an apology might restore the financial support she'd just discovered. I'm sorry if what I said hurt you, she offered finally, her voice softening into the conciliatory tone she used when trying to smooth things over without actually addressing the problem. You know, I sometimes say things I don't mean when I'm frustrated. Of course I love Noah. We can work this out. This isn't about me being hurt. Mom, it's about Noah, and an apology that includes, if isn't an apology at all. What do you want from me? The frustration in her voice was palpable. Right now? Nothing. I need time to figure out what kind of relationship, if any, I want you to have with my son going forward. You would cut us off from our only grandchild? The shock in her voice seemed genuine, as if the idea had never occurred to her. You've already cut yourself off by rejecting who he is, I pointed out. I'm just making it official. After we hung up, I sat at my desk, staring blankly at my computer screen. Despite my calm exterior during the call, I felt hollowed out. The finality of the conversation, of acknowledging the rift that had always existed, that I desperately tried to ignore, left me shaken. My assistant knocked gently on my door. Everything okay? You look like you could use some coffee, or something stronger. I managed a weak smile. Coffee would be great, Jen. Thanks. As she turned to go, I added, and could you clear my afternoon? I need to leave early today. Instead of going back home, I drove to a small park near Noah's school. I needed time alone to think, to process, to grieve what I was losing, and what Noah had never truly had grandparents who accepted him unconditionally. I found a bench overlooking a pond and sat watching ducks glide across the water, my mind replaying years of subtle signs I'd chosen to ignore. My mother's tense smile when Noah lined up his toys in perfect rows. Her exasperated sighs when he refused to eat certain foods or wear certain textures. The way she'd compare him to other children. Look how nicely Madison sits still. Or don't you wish Noah could make friends as easily as your cousin's kids? I'd always defended him, explained his needs, made accommodations. But I'd never confronted the underlying issue, my mother's fundamental inability to accept difference, to embrace a child who didn't fit her narrow definition of normal, and I'd been subsidizing this rejection all along. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Your mother is upset. We need to talk about this like adults. Can you come over tonight? I didn't respond. Instead, I looked at the time and headed to Noah's school, arriving early for pickup. I watched through the fence as his class filed out for recess, my eyes finding him immediately. He wasn't playing with the other children, but stood at the edge of the playground, deeply focused on something in his hands, probably a small toy or interesting rock he'd found. A teacher approached him, said something that made him look up and smile. Then, with gentle encouragement, she guided him toward a small group of children. He hovered at the periphery for a moment, before one boy noticed him and waved him over. Tentatively, Noah joined them. My heart swelled watching this small victory, this moment of connection that came so easily to some children but required such courage from my son. This was who he was, careful, observant, brave in his own way, perfect, when the bell rang. I waited at our usual spot, and the smile that lit up his face when he saw me erased any lingering doubt about my decision. "Mom, you're early," he exclaimed, running toward me with his backpack bouncing. "I thought we could do something fun this afternoon," I said, hugging him. "How about the science museum?" His eyes widened with excitement. The science museum was his favorite place, full of interactive exhibits that engaged his curious mind without overwhelming his senses. "Can we see the electricity show?" he asked as we walked to the car. "Absolutely. Whatever you want." As we explored the museum, moving from exhibit to exhibit at Noah's careful pace, I observed him with new eyes. His intense focus as he worked through a physics puzzle. The way he explained a complex concept to a younger child who seemed confused. His polite "excuse me" were navigating crowded spaces, though I could see the effort it cost him. This was my son, thoughtful, brilliant, kind, despite the challenges he faced in a world that wasn't designed for minds like his. He wasn't weird. He was extraordinary. That evening, after Noah was asleep, my father called again. "Meredith, please." His voice carried a desperation I'd rarely heard. "We need to resolve this. The bank says we're at risk of foreclosure if we can't make the payments." "I'm sorry about that, Dad," I said, and I truly was. My father had always been more accepting of Noah, more willing to adapt to his needs. But this isn't just about money. It's about respect and acceptance. "I know, and your mother was wrong to say what she did. She knows that too. She's just ... set in her ways. From a different generation." "Being from a different generation isn't an excuse for cruelty," I countered. "And frankly, I'm tired of making excuses for her behavior. Noah deserves better. We're family, Meredith. Families forgive each other. Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone to continue hurting your child." He sighed heavily. "What do you want us to do? Lose our home? Start over in our 60s? The guilt trip might have worked once, but not anymore. Those aren't your only options. You could downsize to a smaller place you can actually afford. You could sell some of the stuff you've been hoarding in the garage. Mom could get a part-time job instead of spending her days gossiping with Susan. Your mother hasn't worked in 30 years. Then maybe it's time she started." I did what I could to help when I thought we were a family who supported each other. Now, I know that support only went one way. After another tense exchange, we ended the call without resolution. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back porch, watching the stars and wondering if I was being too harsh. Was I using my financial power as a weapon, just as my mother used her emotional power? Was I punishing them for a moment of candor they never intended me to hear? But then I remembered Noah's face when he heard his grandmother's words. The quiet resignation in his eyes, as if he'd expected the rejection all along. No amount of financial guilt could override my need to protect him from that pain. The next day brought a flurry of calls and texts from extended family. Apparently, my parents had shared their version of events, that I was vindictively cutting them off financially because of a misunderstanding and leaving them to face foreclosure. My Aunt Lisa, my mother's sister, was particularly vocal. "How could you do this to your own parents? After everything they've sacrificed for you?" So your mother said something thoughtless. Who hasn't? That's no reason to make them lose their home. I let most messages go to voicemail, responding only to correct the most egregious misrepresentations. No, I wasn't demanding they sell their home. No, this wasn't a sudden decision made in anger. Yes, I had been secretly supporting them for years without recognition or thanks. By the end of the week, I was emotionally drained from defending a decision no one else seemed to understand. Everyone focused on my parents potentially losing their house, not on my son losing his sense of worth and belonging. Saturday morning, as Noah and I were making pancakes with blueberries on the side, never mixed in, there was a knock at the door. "I'll get it," Noah volunteered, racing to the entryway before I could stop him. I heard his small intake of breath, then, "Grandpa?" My father stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable and out of place. "Hey, buddy," he greeted Noah awkwardly. "Is your mom around?" I appeared behind Noah, placing protective hands on his shoulders. "Dad, this is unexpected. Can we talk?" he asked, his expression pleading. "Properly talk, not over the phone?" I hesitated, then nodded toward the kitchen. "We're making breakfast. You can join us if you want." Noah led the way, chattering about the pancake batter he'd helped mix and the specific way he liked his bacon cooked. My father followed, responding to Noah's commentary with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he'd been paying attention to my son's preferences and enthusiasms. As we ate, the conversation remained light, focused on Noah's school projects and my father's recent fishing trip. Noah, always sensitive to undercurrents, kept glancing between us, clearly aware something significant was happening but unsure what. When he finished eating, I suggested he might want to play in his room for a bit while Grandpa and I talked. He nodded seriously, understanding this was adult business, and disappeared down the hallway. "He looks good," my father commented once we were alone. "Happy. He is good," I confirmed, most of the time. "He still has challenges, but he's thriving in his own way." My father nodded, pushing his empty plate aside. "Your mother doesn't understand him," he said finally. "She tries, in her way, but she has these fixed ideas about what children should be like. How they should behave. That's no excuse for what she said." "No, it's not." He surprised me with his agreement. "What she said was cruel and wrong. I've told her that repeatedly since you confronted us. I studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. And?" He sighed heavily. "And she's struggling to admit it. She keeps saying she was just venting, and that you're overreacting by cutting off financial support." "Of course she does," I said, unsurprised. My mother had never been able to accept responsibility for the harm her words caused. "I'm not here to defend her," my father continued, which did surprise me. "I'm here because... single quotes," he trailed off, seemingly searching for words. "'Cause you're about to lose the house?" I suggested, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. He flinched. "That's part of it, yes. We received a formal notice from the bank yesterday. But I'm also here because I don't want to lose my grandson. Or you." The sincerity in his voice gave me pause. "I love that boy," he continued, gesturing toward Noah's room. "Even with all of his quirks and challenges. Maybe because of them, in some ways. He sees the world differently, notices things other people miss. Do you know what he said to me last time we went fishing? He said the water moving over rocks reminded him of music notes dancing. What 9-year-old thinks like that?" Despite myself, I smiled. That was pure Noah finding poetry in ordinary things. "Your mother doesn't understand him," my father repeated. "But I do, or I'm trying to. And I don't want him growing up thinking his grandfather rejected him." "What are you suggesting?" I asked cautiously. "A compromise. I understand you won't resume the mortgage payments and you shouldn't have to. That was extraordinarily generous and we had no right to expect it in the first place. But maybe you'd consider allowing me to maintain a relationship with Noah, separate from your mother if necessary." The request caught me off guard. I'd been prepared for financial manipulation, for guilt trips about family obligation, not for this simple, heartfelt plea to remain in Noah's life. "And what about the house?" I asked, still suspicious of his motives. "We'll figure something out," he said, echoing my own words from our phone conversation. "I've been talking to a real estate agent about selling. There's a small condo development for seniors that seems promising. Your mother is resistant, of course, but she adjusts." I considered his words carefully. "And if I agree to let you see Noah, what about Mom? I won't expose him to someone who thinks he's weird or embarrassing. I understand that," he said solemnly. "I'm not asking you to force a relationship there until she demonstrates real change if she ever does. I'm just asking for the chance to be his grandfather. On whatever terms you think are appropriate," as I weighed his request. Noah appeared in the doorway, tentatively checking if the adult conversation was finished. "Can Grandpa see my new telescope?" he asked, his eyes hopeful. "It has a special filter for looking at the sun, but not directly at the sun because that would damage your eyes permanently," he added seriously. My father looked to me, waiting for my permission. "Yes," I decided. "Grandpa would love to see your telescope. Why don't you show him how it works? As they headed to Noah's room, my father turned back briefly. Thank you, he mouthed silently. I nodded, not yet ready to verbalize forgiveness or acceptance, but willing to consider this first tentative step toward a new kind of family relationship, one based on respect rather than obligation, on genuine connection rather than financial dependency. That evening, after my father left with plans to visit again the following weekend, just him, we'd agreed. Noah sat beside me on the couch, thoughtfully quiet. Mom, he finally asked, is Grandpa going to come over a lot now? Would you like that? I countered, watching his expression. He nodded slowly. He listens to me. Really listens. And he doesn't mind when I explain things in detail. Then yes, I think Grandpa will be visiting more often. What about Grandma? He asked, his voice smaller. Is she still mad at me for being weird? The question broke my heart. Grandma isn't mad at you, sweetheart. And you're not weird. You're just you. And that's exactly who you should be. Grandma is ... Having a hard time understanding that right now because she's from a different generation? He asked, clearly repeating something he'd heard. That's part of it, I acknowledged. Mostly it's because some people have fixed ideas about how everyone should be. And they struggle when they meet someone who doesn't fit their expectations. Noah considered this seriously. Like when I get upset if my schedule changes unexpectedly? I smiled at his perceptiveness. Something like that, yes. I'm working on being more flexible, he said proudly. Ms. Jenkins is helping me with strategies. I know you are, buddy. And you're doing an amazing job. I hugged him close, marveling at his resilience and insight. Maybe Grandma could learn strategies too, he suggested innocently. Maybe, I agreed, though I had far less faith in my mother's capacity for change than in my son's. Later that night, I received a text from my father. Thank you for today. I've made an appointment with the real estate agent for Monday. Your mother is still resistant, but she'll come around. In the meantime, I've been thinking about Noah's birthday next month. Would it be okay if I got him that advanced chemistry set he mentioned? I promised to supervise all experiments. The message brought unexpected tears to my eyes, not because of the gift offer, but because it showed my father had been listening to Noah, remembering his interests, thinking about him as an individual with specific passions rather than just a weird kid who didn't fit the mold. I responded with tentative approval, adding that Noah would be thrilled with the chemistry set. Then I added, just to be clear, this change in our relationship doesn't mean I'll be resuming financial support. That chapter is closed. His reply came quickly. Understood. This isn't about money. It's about not losing my grandson. Or my daughter. As I set my phone aside, I felt something shift inside. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the first step toward a new understanding. My parents and I would never return to the relationship we had before. The illusion of unconditional acceptance had been shattered by my mother's words. But maybe, just maybe, something more honest could grow from the ruins, at least with my father. The next morning I awoke to an email from my mother. The subject line read simply, I'm sorry. I opened it with trepidation, half expecting another defense disguised as an apology. Instead, I found something I'd never received from my mother before. Accountability. Meredith, she wrote, your father came home yesterday with a clarity I haven't seen in him for years. He made me understand, finally, the harm my words caused. Not just to you, but to Noah, a child who deserves nothing but love and support from his grandmother. I won't make excuses for what I said. It was cruel and wrong. My discomfort with Noah's differences is my problem to work on, not his to accommodate. I've spent too many years worrying about appearances, about what others think, about fitting some arbitrary definition of normal. I don't expect this apology to fix everything. I don't expect you to resume financial support, which I now understand was extraordinarily generous and which we never properly appreciated. I just want you to know that I'm committed to doing better, to being the grandmother Noah deserves if you'll give me another chance. With love and genuine remorse, Mom, I read the email 3 times, searching for the manipulative undertones I'd come to expect from my mother's communications. But for once, there seemed to be none. Just a straightforward acknowledgement of wrong and a commitment to change. Was it enough? Could words repair the damage done? Could my mother truly transform her deeply ingrained attitudes about difference and normalcy? I wasn't sure. But for Noah's sake, perhaps for my own, I was willing to find out. I didn't respond immediately to my mother's email. Instead, I let it sit for several days, returning to it each evening after Noah was asleep, analyzing each sentence for sincerity, searching for the emotional manipulation that had characterized our relationship for as long as I could remember. During that week, my father visited twice, once for dinner on Wednesday evening and again on Saturday to take Noah to the science center. Each time he came alone, honoring our agreement that my mother would not be involved until I decided if and how that relationship might continue. What struck me most was the change in Noah when my father was around. He seemed lighter somehow, more animated. He shared his interests without the hesitation I'd often noticed when my mother was present, launching into detailed explanations of planets or chemical reactions without first glancing to see if he was boring his audience. And my father listened, really listened, asking thoughtful questions and showing genuine interest. It made me realize how rare that kind of attention had been for Noah from either of my parents before. "Grandpa says I might be a scientist someday," Noah told me proudly after their science center visit. "He says my brain notices patterns other people miss." Grandpa's right. I agreed, touched by this validation of Noah's unique way of seeing the world. "Do you think Grandma will come next time?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral in the way it became when he was trying to hide vulnerability. The question caught me off guard. Despite everything, Noah still wanted his grandmother's approval, still hoped for her acceptance. It was both heartbreaking and a testament to his capacity for forgiveness. "Would you like that?" I asked cautiously. He considered the question with characteristic seriousness. "Sometimes Grandma makes me feel like I'm doing everything wrong," he admitted. "But she also makes the best cookies. And she knows a lot about birds. Remember how she taught me all the different calls?" I did remember one of the rare activities my mother and Noah had genuinely bonded over, identifying the birds that visited her backyard feeder. She'd been patient then, matching her pace to his, celebrating his quick memorization of songs and markings. "I'll think about it," I promised, not wanting to commit before. I was certain my mother's apology represented genuine change, rather than a temporary adjustment to get what she wanted. That evening, I finally replied to her email. "Mom, thank you for your apology. I appreciate your acknowledgement of how your words affected Noah. Before we discuss any kind of reconciliation, I need to understand something. What changed? Dad says you're still resistant to selling the house, still upset about the financial situation. So why the sudden insight about Noah? This isn't about punishing you. It's about protecting my son. I need to know your commitment to accepting him as genuine before I can consider allowing you back into his life." Meredith, her response came the next morning. "Meredith, your question is fair. The truth is, your father made me see myself through your eyes and through Noah's. He asked me how I would have felt if my mother had called me weird or embarrassing behind my back. He reminded me how much I struggled with math in school, how my parents hired tutors and never once made me feel defective for needing extra help. You're right that I'm still upset about the house. 30 years of memories are hard to leave behind. But I'm beginning to understand that my resistance to change to anything that disrupts my vision of how life should be's the same rigidity I've criticized in Noah. The difference is, he's 9 and working hard on flexibility. I'm 65 and still throwing internal tantrums when things don't go my way. I don't expect you to believe me based on words alone. Would you consider letting me prove it through actions? Perhaps a short visit, on neutral ground, with you present the entire time." Mom, her insight about her own rigidity versus Noah's surprised me. It showed a level of self-reflection I'd rarely witnessed from my mother. After discussing it with Noah, who was cautiously enthusiastic, I agreed to a trial meeting. Lunch at a restaurant Noah liked, where he felt comfortable with the menu and environment. My father would come too, providing a buffer and additional support. The Sunday of our planned lunch, I was a bundle of nerves. Noah seemed calmer, methodically selecting his outfit and reviewing the restaurant's menu online so he could decide his order in advance, one of his strategies for managing anxiety in social situations. "Remember, I told him as we drove to the restaurant, if you feel uncomfortable at any time, just use our code word and we'll leave." "Telescope," he nodded, repeating the word we'd chosen. "But I think it will be okay. I'm prepared." My parents were already seated when we arrived. My mother visibly nervous, dressed more casually than her usual carefully coordinated outfits. She looked older somehow, the events of the past few weeks having left their mark. "Noah!" my father greeted him warmly. "We saved you the seat facing away from the kitchen door, just like you prefer." Noah's face lit up at this thoughtful accommodation of his need to sit where he wouldn't be startled by servers suddenly appearing. My mother stood awkwardly as we approached. "Hello, Noah," she said, her voice gentler than usual. "It's good to see you." "Hi, Grandma," he replied, not rushing to hug her as he sometimes forced himself to do, sensing this was a different kind of interaction. We settled into our seats, the initial tension gradually easing as my father asked Noah about school and his latest science experiments. Noah responded enthusiastically, occasionally glancing at his grandmother to gauge her reaction. When our food arrived, I watched my mother carefully. In the past, she'd often made subtle faces at Noah's rigid food preferences, his insistence on foods not touching, his specific order of eating items on his plate. This time she said nothing as he carefully separated his French fries from his sandwich and arranged them in perfect lines before eating. In fact, she seemed to be making a conscious effort not to stare or comment. Halfway through the meal, Noah dropped his fork, which clattered loudly on his plate. The sudden noise startled him, and he covered his ears reflexively, a sensory reaction that had often embarrassed my mother in public. "It's okay, buddy," my father said casually. "Happens to everyone." My mother reached into her purse and pulled out a small fabric pouch. "I brought something that might help," she said, handing it to Noah. "It's a weighted lap pad, just a small one. I read that they can help when things get overwhelming." Noah accepted the gift with surprise, placing it across his legs. "It feels nice," he said after a moment. "Heavy, but not too heavy." "I'm glad," my mother said, a tentative smile forming. "I did some research after what happened. I found a support group online for grandparents of children with sensory processing differences. They had lots of suggestions." I stared at her in astonishment. My mother, who barely used the internet for anything beyond email and basic social media, had sought out resources to understand Noah better? "You joined a support group?" Couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. She nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. "It's just an online forum, nothing formal. But the stories others shared it helped me see things differently." One grandmother wrote about how she'd initially struggled with her grandson's behaviors until she realized he was experiencing the world more intensely than others. That resonated with me. Single quotes. Noah, always attuned to emotional undertones, looked between us curiously. "Are you trying to understand my brain better, Grandma?" "Yes," she admitted. "I should have tried harder sooner. I'm sorry for that." Noah considered this with characteristic seriousness. "It's okay. Brains are complicated. Even I don't understand mine sometimes." A smile tugged at the corner of my mother's mouth, a genuine one. Not the tight, forced expression I was accustomed to seeing when Noah said something unexpected. "That's very wise, Noah," she said softly. "Maybe we can learn together." The lunch continued with a new, fragile ease. My mother asked Noah about his current special interests, space and chemistry, listening attentively as he explained the differences between various types of nebulae. She didn't interrupt or try to redirect the conversation to something more normal, as she might have done in the past. When it was time to leave, she hesitated before asking, "I made those oatmeal cookies you like, the ones with chocolate chips but no raisins. Would it be okay if I gave them to you to take home?" Noah looked to me for guidance, clearly tempted by the cookies but aware of the complicated dynamics at play. "That would be fine," I said, making the decision for him. "Thank you for thinking of his preferences." As my mother retrieved the cookie container from their car, my father squeezed my hand. "She's really trying," he said quietly. "I know it doesn't erase what happened, but she wants to do better." I nodded, not quite ready to verbalize forgiveness but acknowledging the effort I was witnessing. When we said goodbye in the parking lot, Noah surprised everyone by initiating a brief hug with my mother, something he rarely did spontaneously. Physical touch being a complicated sensory experience for him. "Thank you for the lap pad," he said, being for learning about my brain. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "You're welcome, Noah. Thank you for giving me another chance." On the drive home, Noah was thoughtful, absently stroking the weighted lap pad he'd kept with him. "Mom?" he finally asked. "Is Grandma sorry for calling me weird?" I chose my words carefully. "Yes, I think she is. And more importantly, I think she's starting to understand that being different isn't the same as being weird. It's just being you, he nodded, processing this. She seemed less squeaky today. Squeaky? I asked, confused. Her voice gets squeaky when she's pretending to be okay with something but isn't really, he explained matter-of-factly. Today it stayed low. That's good, right? I marveled once again at his perceptiveness, his ability to read subtle cues that most people missed. Yes, that's good. It means she was being genuine. That evening, I received a text from my mother. Thank you for today. Noah is an extraordinary child. I'm sorry it took me so long to really see that. Again, I was struck by the absence of manipulation or passive-aggressive undertones that typically characterize her communications. Just a simple, straightforward expression of appreciation and regret. Over the next few weeks, a new pattern emerged. My father continued his regular visits with Noah, sometimes taking him on outings, other times simply spending time with him at our house. My mother joined occasionally, always bringing some small, thoughtful token of her efforts to understand an article about sensory processing, a fidget toy she thought he might like, a book about a child scientist. During one of these visits, about a month after our first lunch, she brought up the house situation unprompted. We've accepted an offer, she told me while Noah and my father were in the backyard setting up a simple rocket launch experiment. It's not what we hoped for in terms of price, but it's enough to buy the condo outright and have a small emergency fund left over. That's good, I said cautiously. How do you feel about it? She sighed, gazing out the window at Noah and my father. Sad to leave, of course. But also, relieved, in a way. The house was becoming a burden, too much maintenance, too many stairs as we get older. The condo is all one level, with a small courtyard instead of a large yard to maintain. And the community? I asked, knowing this had been a sticking point for her, the perceived status of their neighborhood versus the more mixed condo development. It's different, she admitted. But the neighbors seem nice. There's a woman there who runs a birdwatching club. I'm thinking of joining. The conversation shifted to more general topics, but I was struck by the lack of bitterness or accusation in her tone when discussing the move, a situation that was, ultimately, a direct result of my decision to stop financial support. Later, as I walked my parents to their car, my mother hesitated, then said quietly, I've been seeing someone, a therapist. She looked almost embarrassed by the admission. Really? I couldn't hide my surprise. My mother had always dismissed therapy as something for weak people who can't handle their own problems. Dr. Melton? She confirmed. She specializes in late-life transitions and family dynamics. Your father found her, actually. I've only had 3 sessions, but... single quotes, she trailed off, then continued with newfound determination. She's helping me see patterns. How my own mother's criticism shaped how I parent. How my fear of judgment makes me judge others preemptively. That's really good, Mom, I said, genuinely impressed by this step. I should have done it years ago, she acknowledged. Maybe then I wouldn't have hurt you and Noah the way I did. It wasn't a complete transformation. There were still moments when I caught her old judgmental expression flickering across her face when Noah did something particularly outside her comfort zone. But the difference was she now seemed to recognize these reactions and consciously adjust them. After 2 months of these carefully managed visits, I agreed to let Noah spend an afternoon at my parents' house, their last weekend in the home before moving to the condo. It would be the first time he'd visited them without me present since I'd overheard my mother's cruel words. Are you sure? My father asked when I suggested it. We're happy to keep things as they are if you're not comfortable. I think it's time, I said, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. Noah wants to go. He misses the backyard and that big magnolia tree he likes to read under. The day of the visit, Noah was both excited and nervous, methodically packing his backpack with books, comfort items, and the communication cards his therapist had helped him create to express needs when words became difficult. You remember you can call me anytime, I reminded him as we pulled up to my parents' house. And Grandpa knows all your sensory strategies if things get overwhelming. I know. Mom, he said with the exaggerated patience of a child who's heard the same instructions many times. I'll be okay. Grandma's learnin', remember? As if on cue, my mother appeared at the door, waving to us. She'd told Noah she had a special project planned for his visit, but had been mysteriously silent about the details. I walked him to the door, exchanging pleasantries with my parents before reluctantly leaving. This was a test of my mother's commitment to change, of Noah's resilience, of my own ability to trust the process of reconciliation we'd begun. When I returned 4 hours later, I found them in the backyard. Noah was perched on a stepladder, my father spotting him from below, while my mother handed him supplies. They were building a birdhouse, not a pre-cut kit, but when they were constructing from scratch, using real tools and measuring carefully. "Mom," Noah called when he saw me. "Grandma's teaching me about birds and Grandpa's teaching me about building. We're making a special house for chickadees because they're small and like cozy spaces, kinda like me." My mother turned, her face flushed with the afternoon's activity. "He's a natural," she said proudly. "So precise with the measurements. Much better than I would be." I watched as they finished attaching the roof, Noah beaming with accomplishment. This was what I'd always wanted, my son being celebrated for his strengths rather than criticized for his differences. As we prepared to leave, Noah carefully placing the completed birdhouse in a box for transport, my mother pulled me aside. "Thank you for trusting us with him today," she said softly. "I know it wasn't easy. How did it go?" I asked. "Really? Honestly?" "Better than I expected. We had one moment when the electric saw was too loud for him, but we had the noise-canceling headphones ready, and he recovered quickly." She smiled slightly. "He taught me about his reset routine. Did you know he counts prime numbers when he's feeling overwhelmed?" "Brilliant." "Yes, that's one of his strategies," I confirmed, touched that she'd taken the time to learn and understand it. "Meredith," she said, her voice more serious now, "I know things will never be exactly as they were before. I know I broke something important when I said those terrible things about Noah. But I want you to know I'm committed to being better, to being the grandmother he deserves." I studied her face, searching for signs of the old manipulation. Finding none, I nodded slowly. "I believe you're trying. That's all I can ask for right now." Single quotes as Noah and I drove home. The birdhouse carefully secured in the back seat, he asked suddenly, "Are you still mad at Grandma?" I considered the question carefully. Not mad exactly, just cautious. "I want to make sure she continues to treat you with the respect you deserve." He nodded, seeming to understand. "She's different now. Less squeaky. She listens to me talk about space without checking her watch." Out of the mouths of babes. My mother's transformation, as viewed through Noah's perceptive eyes, was measured in concrete behaviors, genuine listening, respect for his interests. Absence of the tense, squeaky voice that signaled hidden disapproval. "I'm glad," I said simply. That night, after Noah was asleep, I sat on my back porch thinking about the journey we'd been on these past months. The hurt and anger that had driven me to cancel those automatic payments still lingered. But alongside it had grown something new, a cautious hope that real change was possible, even in relationships that seemed irreparably damaged. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Moving day tomorrow. Noah's birdhouse will be the first thing we put up at the new place. Thank you for giving us another chance," I replied with a simple heart emoji, not quite ready to express the complex emotions I was feeling. Then I opened my banking app and stared at the account summary, noting the substantial difference in my monthly expenses now that I wasn't silently supporting my parents. I'd redirected most of that money into Noah's college fund and a savings account for our future. But as I looked at the numbers, I realized something important. The financial separation had been necessary not just as a boundary or consequence, but as a reset of our entire family dynamic. By removing the hidden financial support, I'd forced all of us to confront the true nature of our relationships, what we valued, what we were willing to forgive, what kind of family we wanted to be. Money, in this case, had been both a mask and a crutch, enabling patterns that needed to change, hiding resentments that needed to surface. As difficult as the past few months had been, I couldn't regret my decision that night to cancel those payments. It had been the catalyst for a painful but necessary transformation, not just in my mother, but in all of us. 3 years have passed since that night I canceled my mother's mortgage payments. 3 years of rebuilding trust, establishing healthier boundaries, and watching my mother become the grandmother I'd always hoped she would be for Noah. The transition wasn't seamless. There were setbacks, moments when her old judgmental tendencies resurfaced, when she slipped into comparing Noah to normal children. But the difference was that now, she caught herself. She apologized. She did the work to understand why these attitudes were harmful, not just to Noah but to herself. My parents adjusted to condo living better than any of us expected. The smaller space proved easier to maintain, and the community activities gave them a social circle they hadn't realized they were missing. My mother's birdwatching club became a passion, and she began leading tours for children, using knowledge she'd gained from Noah to make them accessible for kids with sensory differences. Noah, now 12, has blossomed in ways I couldn't have imagined. His interests have expanded from astronomy and chemistry to include robotics and computer programming. His relationship with my parents, especially my mother, has evolved into something beautiful to witness, built on genuine understanding rather than forced tolerance. Last month, Noah won first place in the regional science fair with a project on birdhouse designs optimized for different species preferences. My mother beamed with pride as she stood beside him at the awards ceremony, listening attentively as he explained his methodology to the judges. "Your son is remarkable," one judge told me afterward. "His attention to detail and systematic approach are impressive." "Yes," my mother chimed in before I could respond. "His unique way of seeing patterns gives him insights others miss. That's his superpower." I nearly cried hearing those words from the woman who once called my son a weirdo behind his back. Financial boundaries remain clear between us. My parents live within their means, managing on their retirement income and Social Security. I've never resumed payments of any kind, though I occasionally help with unexpected expenses, a major car repair, a significant medical bill not covered by insurance. These are gifts freely given, not obligations silently fulfilled. The most significant change, though, has been in our communication. Where once there were unspoken expectations and hidden resentments, now there is honesty. My mother attends family therapy with us once a month, where we continue to work through old patterns and build healthier ones. "I wish I'd understood sooner," she told me recently as we watched Noah programming a small robot in my living room. "How much I was missing by trying to force him and you into my narrow definition of normal." "What changed?" I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective on her transformation. She considered the question seriously. "Losing the financial security you provided was the wake-up call, of course, but it was more than that. It was seeing the pain in Noah's eyes when he asked if I was ashamed of him. It was realizing that my own fear of difference was robbing me of knowing my grandson for who he truly is." My father, who had joined Noah on the floor to help with the robot, looked up. "Some lessons come at a high price," he said quietly, "but they're worth it if you actually learn from them." Tonight, as I sit on my back porch watching Noah and my parents setting up his telescope for a meteor shower viewing, I feel a sense of peace that once seemed impossible. The financial boundaries I established 3 years ago weren't just about money, they were about respect, acceptance, and the unconditional love every child deserves. My mother approaches carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. "He's explaining the orbital mechanics of meteor showers to your father," she says, handing me one of the mugs. I understand about half of it, but I love watching his face light up when he talks about space. "Thank you," I say, and we both know I'm not just talking about the hot chocolate. "No," she replies, her eyes on Noah as he gestures enthusiastically at the night sky. "Thank you for having the courage to draw that line. For loving him enough to demand better from me. For giving me the chance to be the grandmother he deserves," as Noah calls us over excitedly. Having spotted the first streaking light across the sky, I reflect on how sometimes the most powerful gift we can give those we love isn't financial support or endless tolerance of harmful behavior. Sometimes it's the firm boundary that says, "This is what I require to remain in relationship with you. This is the standard of treatment I demand for myself and my child. If my son isn't good enough for you, neither is my money." It was a hard line drawn from a place of protective love. And in our case, it became the foundation upon which we built something better, stronger, and infinitely more genuine than what we had before. As Noah's hand slips into mine, pointing out constellation patterns only he can see, I know with absolute certainty that I made the right choice. Some debts can't be paid with money. Some lessons are worth every penny they cost to learn.